Let me mute.
Okay. I know there's just a few of us and we know each other, but this is Slido, which we I think used in the last community meeting. You can scan the top and you can tell us what your connection to downtown is. This was just a way to understand who is at the meeting today and just get to know y'all a bit more. If you feel like we should just skip over this question at the moment, I can do that as well. So, yeah, okay. I'm sorry. And I know all of your relationships to the pop-up, so we can skip this one as well. So just going through the project goals. The goal for this project was to activate an underutilized community resource for Salem, create a space for people to connect and engage with local artists and creatives, as well as a long-term goal to serve as an incubator and testing site for future programming models for the Old Town Hall. Through the process of engagement, we heard from artists and creatives, city officials, historians, residents, nonprofit organizations, the National Park Service, different institutions, local businesses, as well as neighbors and visitors and tourists. One of the main concerns, these are a few of the main concerns that we heard before we opened the pop-up. There was a need for more performance space, more equitable and accessible programming for artists. There was a lack of signage and access and communication about events that were happening at Old Town Hall. And there was a need for more youth programming, more diverse representation, and more representation to highlight all of Salem's history. So these are going to be facts and figures based on what we learned and observed at the pop-up. This is a quote that kind of stuck with us a lot from one of the visitors. I was so incredibly happy to see a space like this that was so lovely and welcoming. I live just 45 minutes away and just here for the day, but I'm disabled, and having the space to sit and enjoy art and quiet games and activities made the entire city suddenly more accessible and enjoyable for me for the day. So this just kind of resonated with the kind of space that we were trying to create with the pop-up, and I'm glad we were able to get feedback like this. So to start with, we had a total number of 10,472 visitors over the 3 months. The average number of visitors per day was 201. The most popular day of the week was Saturday. The busiest time of day was between 7 to 8 p.m. The average length of stay for people was 10 minutes. And the most frequent visitors was tourists, and of the number of residents that came in, of the number of visitors that we had, 16% of those people were local Salem residents. Then this is a brief overview of the events. We hosted a total of 51 events. The number, we had asked visitors if they were to pay for these events, how much would they pay? And they averaged between $5 to $10. Most people found out about these events while they were passing by and chose to stop in. And the most popular type of programming was the passive programming, which were the arcade games and the living room space, as well as once the Psychomantium came up that we put in the vault. That was also a big hit that people stopped in for. These are more details about programming. We partnered with a total number of 56 partners, out of which 54% were Salem-based artists, creators, and organizations. Most of the programming partners found out about opportunities through word of mouth. All partners felt that they were fairly compensated, and 75% of the partners felt that they made new connections with other artists and creatives, as well as with the community. And since we were looking at creating a community space, this was kind of evident in seeing where people gathered most. We would see people in the living room space, enjoying the arcade games and the Psychomantium. And people said they enjoyed sharing spaces with other artists and creatives. This came from programming partners. And most people mentioned having positive experiences and interactions with the staff. And partners felt that the pop-up created created more connection for them to the community. So just looking at all that data that we kind of got through the operation of the pop-up, and then as well looking at initial engagement that we did and community surveys that we took out, we created the impact report, which I hope all of you had a chance to go through. If not, you can see more information on everything I've talked about in there as well. So we came up with 3 main impacts and provided opportunities and recommendations for the city based on those. So the first is created a welcoming and accessible community space. We felt that the pop-up, because how much people interacted with the living room space and judging from their feedback and things that they said to us, they felt like they had more access to the old town hall itself, as well as the programming inside, as well as being a feeling of being welcomed into a space and being in a space where they can, do anything as opposed to being there just for a specific event. And these are just some highlights. A woman and her daughter came in regularly to the pop-up so they could see some of the daughter's drawings that she put up on the community art board that we made. And then there was a tour guide that would come in daily to stay warm and play some games between his tours. So based on that, the opportunity that we saw was making Old Town Hall more accessible to the Salem community. And these are some things that we go over in the impact report with detailed recommendations for the city based on a rental structure, which we know we have talked about and heard from the Salem community as well in terms of using both the floors, the second floor rented out and having a public first floor and using the rental revenue from the second floor to fund events to happen on the first floor. In addition to that, we've also seen, because of the response to the signage and having more people stopping by because they saw that, we recommended doing more placemaking work in Derby Square. In terms of also the access to how you see the building, how do you enter the building, it just brings more people in. So doing something in Derby Square would be helpful. And then definitely a lot of signage. The impact report highlights Essex Street and Front Street as well to have signage on. Having the large calendar really helped people stop by and knew exactly what to expect when they walked in. Having signage inside as well helped to orient people too. And then also focusing on bringing people in from surrounding streets like Derby Street and Washington Street as well. And then marketing, we definitely saw people looking at things over social media, artists, creatives sharing their events on there. So making sure that Old Town Hall also starts to have a social media presence and, regularly informing Salem residents about what is happening. And that also brings me next to the memberships. This was brought in based on how much people said they would be willing to pay to come in and be a part of these events and kind of encouraging more local buy-in. So having a membership for events at Old Town Hall, and it would be a sliding scale so people can pay as they are able, the amount they are able to pay. And, just having perks of, getting tickets to events, finding out about events before other people do, and just creating a more tight-knit community of visitors to Old Town Hall and local visitors. And then staffing, definitely we had a struggle with that. So just making sure that there is one permanent staff member as well as an additional volunteer staff member in the space every time it's open, especially from the feedback that we got of people's interaction and how they felt that, having a person there and talking to them and letting them know what was happening was also really helpful. And that's the first one. Our second impact is developed intentional partnerships through new channels of communication. And this is a quote from Chelsea, who also staffed the space and works at the City of Salem. It was helpful as a city staff person to be there and answer questions to people, and just giving people more access to the city as well, and clearing their queries around programming at Old Town Hall. So this leads us to our recommendation for prioritizing community engagement. The first is looking into creating an advisory group. And we have detailed out in the impact report a group of 12 to 15 people that would represent different communities of Salem, including the artists and creatives, the residents, different institutions, different ages, different races, and different and local businesses, and just making sure that everybody is a part of the conversation and is making decisions for programming and Old Town Hall. And then the second is being more intentional about engagement, definitely creating a space where the city is intentionally meeting people where they're at and using different kinds of interactive and observational methods of engaging with visitors, with residents, and making sure that even once the space opens, you're still engaging with people who are visiting, and also taking their feedback and responding to that feedback. And the third is public office hours. So that also stems from what we heard from Chelsea, is just making this a space that people feel welcome and comfortable in, and people can come in and you can have public meetings there, and just creating this kind of intermediate between the city and the residents. And this is the last impact, which is activated Old Town Hall with diverse programming that represents and celebrates the Salem community. So this is just highlighting things visitors said. This was a really cool place where mom and dad could learn a little bit and you got to color. And then also looking at the response that we got to the Creators of Color Boston, just bringing in more BIPOC visitors and creating a space where they felt represented, and seeing their work up as well. So from this, we gathered for the city to create an equitable and model for programming. So creating an equitable pay structure. This includes making sure that all artists, creatives know what that structure looks like. This includes working with the advisory group to come up with this pay structure, and using that to have events in the public part of the first floor. And then that puts us into event approval. This was something we thought would be helpful in terms of making sure that there are different things and different organizations and different artists and creatives being represented in the space over a span of time. So having a way to approve events that happen, making sure that people who have not gotten a chance to be at Old Town Hall are given priority. And again, this would also be a process that goes through the advisory group and would be something that is discussed and taken a decision with the group as a whole. And then diverse offerings. As we saw with the many things that happened at the pop-up simultaneously, of course, there were some things that worked and some things that didn't work together, but creating a space where you can have multiple things happening at the same time brings in more diverse groups of people of different ages to come in. Someone can play games where people can sit. So just making a space where many people feel welcome and feel like they have something to do when they come inside. And that is the last one we have. So just your feedback and thoughts. I know we got some new people in, but we'd love to hear what is your biggest takeaway from your interaction with the pop-up. You can scan the barcode and put it in, or you can join on slido.com by putting that in, putting in the code. I'll give maybe 2-3 minutes to get that in if anyone is interested in answering the question. Okay. I'll skip over that. And I will open it out to questions now. So if anyone has a question, they can raise their hand and I can unmute them. Or if you feel comfortable putting in the chat, we can read those out as well. Any questions, thoughts, feelings about your experience at the pop-up or anything?
Yeah, Rishika, this is Kylie. I'll just, I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep my video off for a second. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. I'm curious to kind of hear more about the balance between new and existing things in the space. Obviously, I have an angle on this because a lot of times I run like the majority of my events out of Old Town Hall.
Sure.
And I certainly want to make sure that Old Town Hall has access to everyone, and especially folks who haven't been able to use the space.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I didn't hear much about what has been working well in the space previously to the pop-up, and it's kind of hard to like see that, you know, like for example, the Arts Festival still brought like the most foot traffic over the course of the pop-up. But you know, in the future, we might be less of a priority than someone who's never gotten to do anything before, which is great. But I don't know. I feel like there's a little more nuance in how we can make that work. So this is a very open-ended question. I'm sorry.
Sure, no, and definitely we did see that, and we do talk about it in the impact report as well, where we mentioned that, you know, the Salem Arts Festival did bring in the most foot traffic, and then also seeing that days when the farmers market was happening, you know, that brought in more people because they were in and around the space. So I think it's more about using those to make sure that other events at Old Town Hall can also, you know, bring in that foot traffic. So learning from those and not so much, I mean, I would love to see them still happening and still activating Old Town Hall the way they do. I think it's more focusing towards learning from those and making those opportunities open, say, to a different kind of festival happening in the space, or a different kind of exhibition that brings in that kind of foot traffic too. Doreen.
We can't hear you, Doreen.
Oh, I was trying to put the little hand up, but I didn't know how, so I just started waving.
No,
I want to make a comment.
sure.
When I first became involved, many of you remember my comment about we didn't feel welcome. Since the pop-up, I can actually say that number one, my exhibit got a lot of attention being in the pop-up. And I got a lot of emails and feedback from other artists that were in there and from the general public. And since then, I now have begun to feel like it's very welcoming and it's very open. And Julie and Chelsea have called and reached out to me. And in the short time this has been happening, I see the ability to want to improve. And that would be based upon just how hard we work from this moment on. But I do see that people do want to work and make a change for Old Town Hall. And I just felt like I really wanted to say that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you're having that experience as well, and you had that with the pop-up.
Rishika, do you mind if if maybe we could do stop screen share for a moment if you don't have any more slides, and we could just chat, and I could speak to Kylie's direct question, and then I could move into, because I did prepare a little bit of a slideshow that will walk us through sort of like what the city's responses to some of Culture House's recommendations were.
Sure, yeah. I just again just want to we'll put the link in the chat. If you haven't seen the impact report, you can see it on the Culture House website. It is also on the Old Town Hall website too. I will pass it over to Julie.
Thank you so much for that run through of the impact report, Rishika. And I think it was a really great learning experience for us as well, seeing how individuals were and groups and organizations were interacting with Old Town Hall in the space, learning what worked and what didn't work. And I think Kylie's point is really an important point. Of how we're going to be integrating previous activations with new outreach and activations. And I really see it. And I think one of the things that we learned from the Culture House pop-up is that this is very much wanting to be a community space, right? Like the community wants to be able to be in this space, to move through this space, and to be able to engage with it. And events like, the Arts Festival do just that. And so I think holding space for those types of events that do allow for increased community access, large showcasing of individual artists within our community is certainly going to be within the mission of the future of Old Town Hall. And whether or not the city is able to get the funding to move forward with the renovations and restorations that we have in place, I think it became very clear to everyone that sort of a new model of operations is needed, but we also still need to hold the space for people who have been historically engaging with the facility. So I think looking to the group that we've already established as a sort of a working group through this, the Culture House stuff, as well as opening up that invitation to additional community members to come in and to help inform that model of operations is going to be part of our next steps. And so that kind of brings me to our PowerPoint presentation that Chelsea and I have put together to sort of address some of those concerns and rooms for growth that Culture House found through their impact report. And so I'll share my screen if I may. From the beginning. There we go. So responsive action steps to what is the city planning to do now? So it is our goal to make Old Town Hall more accessible for the Salem community at large. We have refined the rental structure, and it's publicly posted on our website. So that's sort of like an easy, low lift thing that we've already achieved. We've got discounted rates for the Salem community and residents, nonprofit entities. We've also implemented a brand new multi-day art policy that offers significant discounts to arts and culture-based events and activations in the space to encourage more arts and culture use from the community. We also are trying to make it really clear and on our website and in every way that we talk about the space that anyone is able to use this space. All they have to do is just submit an application online, and if the space is available, they can use it for their event. And working with people to find a price point for that rental that works for them while still being able to cover the overhead of the cost, but not playing favorites, having a clear and transparent policy that's the same across the board for everyone. The more free programming an organization or an activation offers to the community, the more discounted rate we can offer. So it's like that community give back balances out the cost of the use of the space. So proposals that provide free programming to the public, that are able to staff the facility during open hours and provide programming, and especially providing programming that directly serves an underserved population. We work with them to provide the access to the space free of charge. On the sort of just speaking to some of the specific steps that Culture House recommended that we might be able to take to improve the sort of community liaising of the space, holding space for that community living room and ensuring that whenever the building is open to the public through other activations, that we still have this sort of living room aspect to it where you can come in and play games or put together a puzzle. So having that incorporated into all of the activations that we do that are open to the public sort of going forward is one of our plans. Creating intentional partnerships that offer those free access to the public. We have several upcoming, the student design exhibition from Salem State University. We have some winter activations that are going to be sponsored by the Public Art Commission and others as well. Specifically, the public artist in residence is going to be doing a residency at Old Town Hall to showcase her work, and then also a program that we're working on with Salem United. Oops, I'm so sorry. Derby Square commenting on how to intentionally link those two spaces together. I think some really good examples of these are going to be the upcoming winter activations, where we'll have activations happening inside and out, creating a dialogue between those two spaces and encouraging people to flow in and out. Then, of course, the signage, we are working towards more permanent signage. It's definitely something that's needed. It is a nuanced process because of the historic nature of the building. But in the meantime, we're going to be utilizing our A-frames much more, as well as like opened and closed signs and things like that, and making sure that our website is also active and front and center to inform the public about what's happening in the space, so it doesn't just seem like a dark box in the middle of the square. We are also going to be, again, we have that newly implemented online calendar where you can see online all of the events that are happening in Old Town Hall, the A-frames with the programming. We can assist with the Facebook posts for featured events in Old Town Hall and make sure that those are shared out on our social media, sharing out press releases for events that are happening, and then intentional collaboration around marketing efforts. So putting out flyers and creating other promotional materials in partnership with events that are happening. We do not have a marketing department, so we can't fully execute that for all of the events, but we can be a partner in those by helping to push forward materials that have been created by the entities in the event. That are hosting the events. The memberships are not something that was really a viable option for us, and we need to explore that further when we're looking at the future operations of the building. But working towards the more intentional programming where we can offer free events instead of people having to pay for them. So the memberships were more like, I think, and Rishika, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, that membership was something where you could get discounted offerings or discounted tickets if you were a paid member, right? So we're just sort of working towards offering free programming in the meantime. But in the future, we could potentially develop a membership base or even like a friends of sort of platform that could help us raise funds for the building and potentially pay for the build out that we're hoping to do. Staffing, we did create the part-time position for the planning assistant in response to staffing needs. Planning assistant can work off-site at Old Town Hall. So Chelsea's role, for instance, she could work her hours at Old Town Hall, which is what we did with the number of activations during the pop-up and after to help ensure that we have public hours in the space. And then additional staffing will absolutely need to be deployed when we sort of increase the operations of the building and increasing its usability through structural upgrades. And it will 100% be, additional staffing will be part of that plan. So the advisors, we do have this group that we have been working with CultureHouse. We plan to keep them in touch with the process. And once the city has determined its next steps for the restoration and the renovation of the building, the advisory group will be engaged around the future operations and to inform the city programming for the space. We will still accept rentals and things like that, but trying to find the balance is going to be part of the role of the advisory committee, working towards a operation structure that works for and with the community, as well as creates a sustainable operations for the building. Then, of course, intentional engagement, and there's a number of ways that we're doing that, actively considering programming that allows for increased free public access, furthering the mission to connect with underserved populations and helping them to be able to see themselves in the space. So when we have communities that aren't normally represented in there, or haven't historically been represented in the space, intentionally seeking out those partnerships so that they can be and feel represented in the space, and providing those opportunities. And then the public office hours. Currently, we do have the public office hours here at the City Hall where people can come, but also additional hours. It is something on our minds to create additional hours at Old Town Hall itself once the staffing abilities have been increased in that realm, or able to be there in addition to the event open hours. And Chelsea, if I'm missing anything along the way, please feel free to chime in.
Nothing so far.
Excellent. The equitable pay structure is something that was developed with CultureHouse, is something that we plan on continuing throughout. We're using a very similar model with the development of the partnership with Salem United that we're working on, and we'll continue to utilize those tested pay structures, and we'll be reviewing them annually to ensure that they are still appropriate for the time and what's happening in the world around us. We are also willing to help facilitate grant opportunities, so writing letters of support, reviewing draft grant applications, things like that, that would help further the opportunities for equitable pay for activations within Old Town Hall. The event approval is currently gone through the open application process, and it's on a first come, first served basis. So if somebody reaches out to us and the space is available, then that we typically we are not saying no, we're just saying yes, let's do this here. But part of our process of this sort of intentional outreach will hopefully raise awareness around the fact that you can come to us with these applications and that you can submit proposals to us. And then there'll be a more thorough sort of approval and vetting process set up once the advisory board is in place and we have sort of our operations trajectory lined out for future operations of the building. And of course, the diverse offerings, which is incredibly important as well, sort of diversifying what's in the space. And I think that's really going to be about those intentional partnerships and the edification and education of the community around the fact that this is something that's accessible and it is a available resource. So just making sure that the community knows that they are able to apply to use the space are efforts that we're going to be doing from internally. The city actually doesn't program the space, but we look for those partnerships within the community for the community to program the space. And that's going to be our continued model going forward for now until we have a more fully fleshed out operation plan in place. So that brings me to the restoration and renovation project itself. We are in the final finishing touches phase of the design development report. We had a preliminary meeting with them last week to review the design development, and we're looking at a multiples of millions of dollars that are going to be needed to restore this facility. And unfortunately, due to the type of restorations that are needed and renovations that are needed, it really needs to be done holistically. It's not something that can really be parsed out and done in phases. So we're going to be taking the next year and a half to do fundraising and really digging into being able to raise the funds and find the grant writing, to be able to do these renovations and to bring the building up to where it needs to be be a true community arts and culture center. As Rishika alluded to in her presentation, the increasing the functionality is the only way that we're going to be able to increase the operations of the space. So fire suppression system and structural repairs are going to be needed in order to increase our occupancy loads. Having sound isolation in the space where we can actually, each of the floors are isolated from one another so that we can have simultaneous events happening in the space and flowing throughout the space. Ground source heat pump. So installing that so that we can not only be sustainable and environmentally friendly, but also provide year-round use by a fully functioning heating and AC system. Updated plumbing throughout, updated electrical throughout. Again, those structural repairs and acoustic baffling. Additional ADA access ramp to the rear of the building. So coming from the front street side of the space down into the basement, so that you can get directly from sort of the front street facade of the building into the basement, into the restrooms. That also increases our ability to be able to utilize those restrooms for events when no other events are happening in the building. So for October or possibly, the Arts Fest and things like that. So that ramp would also increases the functionality of the lower level in general. Storm windows on the exterior for sustainability, and all of this work would also be conducted in keeping with the highest of historical integrity and to ensure that the building maintains its beauty. And then the specifics on each level, just to sort of let you guys know what we're cooking up. And so that you can know what's coming and our dreams for the future of Old Town Hall, and hopefully those are shared with the community, is that we fully gut the basement. There's going to be brand new restrooms all throughout the basement, new ceiling, new floor, new wiring, updated restrooms that would include a family restroom, non-gendered family restroom with an adult size ADA changing table. We would also have a new classroom that would be fully equipped with technology for virtual and in-purpose uses, as well as like an art sink in there. Better storage facilities, so cage storage areas for individual long-term renters to be able, so if we do theater residencies or other such residencies, these companies that are partnering with us would have individual storage cages to be able to keep their things. Catering pantry / kitchen in the basement, and then direct access to the outside via that ADA ramp. And there'll be an entirely new boiler room with all new equipment in there as well, and a sprinkler system. So sorry. My mouse is really sensitive. I apologize. On the first floor, there would be alterations to the front stoop. So that would be the Essex Street side of the building to install an ADA push button access for the doors, as well as extend that whole entranceway and ramp. It would be in keeping with its current appearance, but it would just be all extended and increased in size by about 18 inches to increase accessibility to the front entrance, to make that fully, truly ADA accessible. We're going to be updating all of the thresholds throughout the space to improve ADA access and flow in the space. Slight alterations to the front foyer to improve traffic flow so that you can traverse up and down all throughout the building in the front of the building without having to pass through the colonnade. And if you need ADA access to the top floor and you don't want to have to pass through the colonnade, you can do that by entering the ramp to the basement and then taking the elevator to the top floor. So if you have an event happening in on that first floor colonnade, you don't have to disrupt that event for another event that's happening on another level, and vice versa. Dedicated storage room in that area, acoustic baffling and sound isolation to increase functionality, and then installation of new tech to facilitate virtual and in-person uses, all new lighting system, etc. And in the Great Hall, there would be an ADA lift for the stage to make our stage fully accessible. Right now, the stage is not ADA accessible. We would be updating the thresholds throughout for, again, improved ADA access, updated tech for more diverse programming. We hopefully will have the technology in that space to be able to broadcast performances. So for instance, if we have to go virtual again for something like what happened with the COVID-19 pandemic, we would be able to easily pivot to virtual programming in the space and not have to go dark with the new technology plan to be installed there. And also acoustic baffling as well to sound isolate and create a more harmonious space for speaking presentations in there. Right now, the Great Hall lends itself extremely well to acoustic musical events, but when you try to speak or you have more than one person talking in there and or amplified sound of any sort, it becomes really cacophonous. So having that acoustic baffling in there is going to really increase the functionality of the space. Would also be bringing the restroom up, renovating the restroom in there as well. So those are the general overviews of the plan for the future of the actual restoration and renovations of the space. And it occurs to me that we should probably talk a little bit about the operation plan as well. We are currently exploring other cities who have done similar projects and looking for ways that we could create partnerships with and long-term partnerships with entities that would allow us to create a sustainable operations model in the space. There are a number of different ways that we could do this. There's, option one would be that the city just continues to program it as a, pop-up kind of arts and culture event space and a rental space, but that doesn't really have a whole lot of longevity in the sense of sustainability and community engagement. Another model would be for the city to potentially outsource it all to a third party, but the city feels that that would kind of take the community too far out of the factoring. And we feel very strongly that this needs to be a community focused arts and culture space. So it will most likely be some hybrid of the two, where we have long-term partnerships with a third party or multiple third parties that help create the sustainability and activate the top floors, the top floor and the workshop area, while still holding space on that first floor colonnade for like community gatherings, that community living room space and other activations. Thinking long-term and about sustainability and functionality is certainly something we are going to want to put multiple heads in a room on and to work through together. I think there's multiple problems with just saying, okay, all of the people that we've always worked with will still have the same exact access to the space that they have had, because that does not necessarily create opportunities for additional people to come in and access the space on those same times when they might be interested in doing so. However, it is important to the city to prioritize the long-term relationships in some way. So I think detailed conversations are going to have to be had around what it looks like on both ends. But we're open to those conversations. We're not looking to mandate anything at this point. I think we're still very much in the development stages for this, and we'll be working together with the community really deliberately over the next year or two to sort of define what these operations are going to look like and what the future of the building is going to be. And a big part of that is going to come in to play with the finances of whether or not the city is like going to be like, yes, we're going to pull the trigger and we're going to try to do everything we can to raise these funds, and this is our goal, this is what we're going to do, or do we work with what we have and just continue in the best way that we can, working with our community. And so until the city gets that final design development report and that total cost estimate, which we thought we would have by now, but we're still waiting on a few little pieces that will come. And once we have that, we'll have to sit with it and digest it and then really come up with our next step strategy. But for now, that's where we are. Are there any questions about that, or I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys might have. Kylie.
I've been thinking about this for months, and I've been trying to think of a way to do it that also meets the accessibility and engaging and openness and transparency that we want. But I feel like it kind of goes back to the sustainability piece. We've talked about like a membership thing for attendees. Have you talked about a membership program for, I'm sorry, my child has decided he's starving. For frequent users, you know, like me, where we could get trained in how to use the space, you know, proper cleaning of the bathrooms and locking up and trash removal and all that good stuff. So it wouldn't always involve a city staff person, so that, you know, like we wouldn't, again, this is why I'm thinking about it, because it's like, I don't want to think of a program that like guarantees those members a certain number of dates, because then that undoes the like accessibility that we want to do. But I feel like it could help with, you know what I mean? I'm like trying to find the balance between the sustainability and the accessibility that we've all been trying to find for so long. And that's
so hard.
Something we haven't tried yet.
I think that's a great idea. Like we had been talking about residencies, which is kind of along the same lines, right? So the idea of an artist coming in and saying, I'm going to be the theater company and resident for 3 months, and they have the space for 3 months, and they, you know, they build it out, do their show, whatever. So having rotating residencies is one option, but that doesn't necessarily speak to something like your event, right? Where it's a festival, it's more of a one-off 3-day event. And so I think partnerships with entities that want to use the space is an interesting idea, and like memberships along those lines, where it's like, okay, well, you pay your membership fee annually, and that guarantees you like your first right of refusal for, you know, 1 block of dates a year or something along those lines. I mean, that could be a really interesting model to explore. Or there's like this annual membership fee that you pay in addition to the rental in order to be able to get like first right of refusal on dates at the beginning of each calendar year or something like that. I mean, we'd have to really think that through. It's not a policy that would be obvious, but I think there's something there to explore. You know, I think I hear what you're saying, because I do think it's important to ensure that the people that have kept the ship afloat for so long get to continue to be a part of it. And I think that's really important. And so, and something that I'm just painfully aware of and trying to figure out how to make that work. Right.
Well, you know, and the challenge with the residencies is that like, if you have a residency, then it's not available for anything else, you know, so that kind of takes out such a huge block. But I kind of like had these unofficial kind of programs where like I knew where the tables were supposed to go back, and I knew like that kind of thing. But if I wasn't getting kind of officially trained in that, I might add to the wear and tear of the space in a way that I don't mean to. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I've been trying to think around, is that those of us who like do love to use the space semi-regularly over years to make sure that we're using it better. Yeah. But I don't want it to be like kind of right of refusal, where then like, because that goes back to like, I paid a certain amount, so now I'm guaranteed space over somebody else.
Yeah, which doesn't really, it leaves a kind of bad taste in your mouth.
But if it means that like Chelsea doesn't have to be there every time I'm in the space because I've like run so many events that I know where the trash goes.
Ah, mhm.
Yeah,
I s-
That's
I
more
see
what
what you're
I'm
saying.
trying to get at is like if we get trained in use of the space, so it means there doesn't always have to be city staff paid to be there for the folks who've been that kind of thing. That's more what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
in
I understand
some
what you're saying.
way, I think it's in order to hold a membership, you have to go through a specific training, say each year, to ensure that you're staying most up to date with the facility, and how that then links in to access to the facility, I think is something that Julie and I would have to investigate more deeply to sort of make sure we're not putting limitations, but still you're not just paying for a membership for training, but potentially the dates, such as Julie is saying, or first right of refusal within a certain amount of time to set it aside, or however that sort of develops. I think there is definitely something there, but the option to do a training as part of the membership, I think, is both beneficial all around.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely idea now that I'm kind of understanding more about what you're saying. And the residencies, if we are able to do the restorations and renovations that we have in mind, they wouldn't preclude something else happening in the space because you'd have 2 other floors that you could do something on, right? So the residency would give you access to the theater space upstairs and a storage space downstairs, but then you would have the colonnade and the classroom. That you could still activate with programming while that residency was happening. So, I think there, if we are able to do the build out in the way that we would like to, it's going to drastically change the way that we're able to engage with the space and the level of accessibility, community access, that sort of thing that we have. It's all going to drastically change with this restoration. So we're kind of in this limbo right now, which is really difficult, I have to say, because even I am like, I don't know what the next year is going to look like. I'm in this sort of like programming limbo where the city has not fully committed to the restoration yet because we don't have the funds and we don't really know what the full design would look like, but they know that they have to do something. And so we're in this figuring it out sort of stage, where the next, I think, 3 months, 4 months even, we're probably going to not really have a solid direction. But hopefully after that, we'll know a little bit more about what the city's goals are, and what they're willing to, if they're willing to put their money where their mouth is a little bit, and, make the commitment that needs to be made. But it's a huge commitment. So we need to ensure that the community would be in support of it as well, because that's a big chunk of taxpayers' dollars. And, we're able to apply for some grant funding to offset that. But when you're looking at the grants, they're coming in at like $200,000. $50,000, $200,000 over here, and piecemealing multiple millions of dollar project through $200,000 grants would be a nightmare. So just we need a substantial buy-in from the community at large and city government to be able to renovate the space in a way that it needs to be done. And in order to do any of this work, it triggers code compliance, which triggers like 50 other things that we have to do. So it's not like we can even parse it out and do small projects to renovate it. So it really is going to be like, bare minimum of replacing the doors and hoping for the best, and then full on. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. Like that's, but I'm hopeful that we'll be able to know more about the city's intent once this design development phase is fully completed. We have that report and we're able to mull it over a bit.
And I think to some extent, to Julie's point as well, is that depending on what happens with the facility greatly impacts what operational things we need and sort of what we're asking of renters to some extent as well in the space based off of what the facility can handle and what we can handle as well within the facility. And so I think that that's a huge piece too in our operational determination, because right now it's sort of the cart before the horse to really make any operational decisions.
So we're building models the best that we can that feel fair, equitable, and sustainable now with the building's current state. But that I don't want for people to think that we are ingraining this in any way or like setting a precedent that's not able to be changed with these policies that we're working towards now. We are very much in flex mode, and I am open to any and all suggestions that are coming out of the community for how to sort of limp through these next couple of years until we have the renovated facility, if that is going to be the ultimate outcome. And if not, then we're really going to have to get creative. Yeah. So I'm going to be looking at you guys to help me do this. Yeah, because it can't be just my mind, because like that's, you know, that doesn't create a fair and equitable, accessible situation. You know, we're going to need all of these minds behind it to come up with a model that works for the majority.
And I think to the best of our ability, we stay responsive to the feedback, because as you said, nothing is set in stone. And so everything's sort of experimental at this point in time, where we might implement something and then find that it doesn't work in the way that we were hoping or thinking, and that reevaluation process. And I think receiving honest feedback will be huge in making sure that whatever we truly do settle on at some point in time has been fully considered and has received all that honest feedback.
And the arts policy has already proven really fruitful, and we've gotten a number of high quality activations through that reduction in rent for arts and culture activations. And so I think flushing that out a bit and continuing to seek those partnerships, continuing to seek partnerships like that with the Salem United and Salem State University, you know, with the student exhibitions and things like that, can also increase just engagement with the space. And the more people know about the space, the more people are in the space, the more we can make informed decisions about the future of the space. So does that, I know that probably does not assuage any of your fears, but I'm also.
Our fears are just as big. I think we just all have the same fears. We love this space, and it's a lot of money, and we're just all worried about how to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I'm right there with you. But know that I am a diehard advocate for this space. I feel it is crucial to Salem's downtown and to Salem's arts and culture identity, and that to not invest in it would be, I think, a serious misstep. So I feel like the city, if we can figure out a way to do it, I know that the interest is there. I know that the city values the building, but we just have to figure out how to get the money together to do it. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? So I think you can say with confidence that this next year coming up will be very similar to the way that it has been in years past. In recent years past, I will say, not in when nobody could access the space, but in recent years past, that we would look to partner with Main Streets on their events. We would look to partner with other long-term users of the space on the events that they wish to execute. October is a bit of a moving target, but I think because there are so many asks for that. I'm really trying to figure out a way to make fair and equitable use of the space, and I'm coming up short at the moment, but I'm still working on it. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Does anybody know a millionaire that wants to donate lots and lots of money? Naming rights. I don't care. Linda Mullen Colonnade.
I have $5 for you.
Yeah. Well, if you happen to hear of anybody who has lots of money and they want to spend it on arts and culture, send them my way. But thank you all for your time and your support and your partnership. It is going to be, teamwork makes the dream work kind of situation. So we'll be looking to tap you guys when the time comes when we're starting to talk about next steps. And I'll let you know as soon as the design development report is available for viewing.
Thank you all for coming to the meeting.
Yes. And I just also want to give a huge shout out to Rishika and her team at CultureHouse for helping to facilitate the partnership, the pop-up partnership, and for their great work on the impact report. It was really informative and insightful, and looking closely at oneself is never an easy thing to do. So I think, having the critical feedback is in the mirror to reflect sort of what the community is really seeing is just really important, and a great lens for us to have. So we really appreciate the work that you did on that, Rishika. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thanks to all of you, and we'll be in touch. You know how to reach us if you have questions. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night.